this video, I will be doing something different. I'll be summarizing all the dev blogs / diaries which can be found on their site. A link is below in the description if you want to read the blogs in full rather than or in tandem with my video. I still attempt to rewrite things in my own words, with the focus being giving you only what you need to know or should know from the dev blogs themselves. At the end, I will throw in some bonus info as well. One more thing before we start that I have to point out is that some of this information you may already know, and hopefully you do learn something still as well. This, like I said, is going to be going over everything in the dev blogs, and I'm sure some people have already covered this. But if you are curious and you just want the bullet point answers or the shorter version of it rather than having to read through it all, you can get it all here like I said previously. Okay, so I want to mention just a few things before we start, and one that is, I had to pace myself. Which is the reason why it's two and a half weeks later from the last release that I did for one of these videos, whether it's Cyberpunk 2077 or Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, because I was releasing them within 4 days of each other, and then also doing the research when I wasn't actually editing the video or doing my main series that I was streaming that day, and I really needed to stretch it out. I really didn't want to because I wanted A, to maximize on the views, B, to maximize on the subscribers, and C, to give you guys all the information I had immediately. Which, by the way, was a lot. Unfortunately, right now, I am on the wit's end for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, so if you have any more information that isn't in the first two, as well as this one, please share it. I will add it to a new list, and then I will share that in part 4 when I have enough content. I do have a ton of script, I guess you could say, ready for Cyberpunk 2077, and that will be the one that I'm going to be working on while I'm waiting for more information to come out for Bloodlines 2. Now we're going to go over the Bloodline 2 game pillars. This is the first thing we're going over, and that is be a vampire, show the world of darkness, reactivity and player choice, and be a true descendant of Bloodlines. These are the 4 pillars that they decided to work through to build Bloodlines 2. Now we're going to go over them before moving on to the next, and the first one is be a vampire, like I said. It goes deeper than feeding on humans and avoiding the sun. From the player's perspective, there should always be a sense of supernatural power, even for a fledgling or relatively weak vampire. Features and systems should always be evaluated against this. Dialogue and interactions should always reflect this. The relationship between the player and citizens of Seattle should always be evaluated as a relationship between a hunter and prey, be it through feeding systems, combat, or dialogue. This also pertains to what might threaten a vampire. How do you scare a monster? A player that moves through the world unconventionally needs to learn how to read the world unconventionally, and a lot of effort is made to make sure the player really does start to think like and be a vampire. Moving on to the next one, we got show the world of darkness. The foundation of the world of darkness is storytelling. The world of Bloodline should always be informed by the nature of the world of darkness. This should be reflected not only in the look and design of the environment, but in the personalities of its inhabitants, and in the nature and presentation of missions and events in the game. A world that hits the mark visually needs to be filled with the characters, history, and small environmental touches that bring the world of darkness to life, and those all need to reinforce the tone. Now we're on reactivity and player choice. Players should always be faced with choices. Sometimes they should be confronted with choices where there is no right thing to do, or times where they're forced to choose between 2 equally unsavory options. As players make decisions, the world and gameplay experience must reflect these choices, be it through reactive dialogue, reactive story events, or even how players decide to build and grow their character. Players should never get the sense that they're making a choice that will lessen the game experience, even if they made a wrong choice. Choice should always be acknowledged by the game, even if only in minor ways. Every player build must have access to, though not necessarily equal ability in, powers that have applications for combat, dialogue, and traversal. This means that players who prefer combat characters can certainly build to their preference, but always have options as to how and when to deviate from the archetype. They may not be smooth talkers, but they can certainly try and sometimes fail. There are often consequences for certain choices, and it's not always obvious. In Bloodlines 2, you make choices and the game reacts to reflect those choices. Whether you choose to end a conversation violently, break the masquerade by feeding in public space, kill everyone on sight, or attempt to not kill anyone, you get to decide what kind of monster you want to be, and the game will react accordingly. And the last pillar that we're going to be going over is be a true descendant of Bloodlines. Players should immediately get the sense that they are re-entering that world, though in a different place in time. The tone of the narrative and dialogue, the balance between the familiar and the otherworldly, and the treatment of disturbing and mature subject matter are all crucial to the maintaining that feel. It must feel like an expansion of the original world. Alignment with various factions, loyalties, and betrayals played heavily into the ending of the original game. We wanted to go, and by we, I mean they obviously, and make sure that those elements are pulled as far forward as possible, so that they figure more heavily into the early game. They then made it a point of challenging those loyalties and providing opportunities for betrayal as often as possible, which has even wider implications at the end. And now we move over to writing Bloodlines 2. Bloodlines 1 and 2 are games that are much more interested in how its NPCs might fuck with you, rather than how you might be able to fuck with them. You start the game already a political pawn in another person's game of chess. Vampire relations in Santa Monica and Bloodlines 1, for example, were already a tense and volatile political mess before you even started the game. In Bloodlines 1 as well as in Bloodlines 2, every vampire you encounter in the game has been a vampire for longer than you have. You are in their realm. You're not the hero of a tale, and neither are they. You are merely trying to make a mark on a world that got fucked up without you. And for characters that are weaker than you, mortals for example, you have the ability to rope them into your nightmare. But what is certain is that there will be very little good outcomes for anyone involved with you, a monster. Try to be nice and it will backfire. Try to be kind and you might have to be cruel. Try to help out and you might help out the worst of the world of darkness. But what is certain is that this neo-noir set of characters is not going to give you a bunch of vampire powers and then let you do whatever you like. Someone created you for a reason. In Bloodlines 1 and therefore Bloodlines 2, you cannot achieve anything without hurting people or making them angry. You can only choose who you hurt and how you hurt them. You can choose between one vampire political reality or another. Everything is seen through vampiric eyes. When you're immortal, you do not work a mortal time. The politics is long term. You have to stay undead and stay powerful. And in order to do that, you have to start manipulating. For example, if humans are dying out in mass, how will you feed? If the humans stop free movement from happening, where will you live? Will your reality become more difficult? How do vampires use technology and manipulate their food supply? What's the lowest effort way you can stay alive as a vampire? How can you stop humans from knowing that you exist, and yet keep them sweet on you so that you can feed on them easily? How do mortal politics interfere with your unlife? When the city bans sex work, is that good or bad for you and those you know? Does perpetuating mortal trauma make an undead existence easier or harder to deal with? If you suck blood at a particular blood shop, what happens when another vampire takes it over? Does what you were doing before the embrace impact how people react to you now? Is there anything that scares you as a vampire? Whatever difficult choices that are forced for you to make, the world will give you consequences that are always equally interesting as each other. They try to open up every conversation so that you have a number of ways you can get through it, either by negotiating, coercing, or seducing, for example. They also make bribery an option. Even starting a fight or finding a way to avoid people is a viable way to get by. If you're a Malkavian, perhaps your options are more terrifying than usual, or you can merely ask a bunch of questions until you are forced to choose what to do. A lot of our characters, or their characters, are assholes. A lot of people who exist in the real world are assholes. No one character will be just a category of person. If you laugh at a joke an asshole makes, it doesn't make them any less a bad person who will screw you over at a moment's notice. If you keep one asshole alive, maybe some other bad people will be really mad about it. Depending on who you hang out with, maybe you'd have a different perspective on them. Around the time your character was created in an event called the Mass Embrace, a small number of other vampires were also created. Unlike you, they were abandoned and they did not get to choose who they were when they were embraced. Their lives were interrupted and they were made immortal, and all their relationships with the world were frozen in time. They're your brothers and sisters in a way, and perhaps they are not having as privileged a time as you are. They had no guidance on the crossover. They had no support as to what was happening to them. They have to deal with their unlives as is. Onto the HUD, everyone. In the UI, they use the color red very sparingly and only when it pertains to blood, blood gain, blood loss, using blood, and specific feedback regarding health status. This is to help emphasize to the player that their very precious resource is changing and they need to act accordingly. In the HUD, related items are grouped together. Navigation, blood-related systems like health, hunger, and disciplines, combat, and others all have a specific place based on the attention they demand of the player. Notifications also follow this rule. Things that demand less of the player's time are small and appear in a certain location, while very important notifications, such as quest completed, dominate screen space and player attention. Players can expect the UI to function the same way no matter how they are using it. From character creation to quests to navigation, the player performs an action and the expected result occurs. The goal here is to make managing your character less of a chore and something you enjoy doing. They use contrast, texture, iconography, FX, text, and layout to provide the primary feedback, and use color as a secondary enhancement. This helps players with color vision deficiencies without having to have a separate colorblind mode. The icons are designed to not rely on gendered tropes, such as pouty lips for seduction or a man's dress shirt to represent wardrobe. And we use straightforward, or they use straightforward ideas for icons that can be interpreted no matter the native language or culture. And now we're on to environmental design, or the environment design. A glimpse into how a vampire adjusts their immortal life over time. If you were randomly bitten by a vampire on the street at night, you would probably be in a daze for a while. When you finally come to your senses, you would likely head home, rather confused since you did not have any considerable visible marks of your attack. You would wake up to the most confusing day of your life. The rays of the sun would burn and irritate your skin, food is no longer appetizing, and water is not quenching your unbearable thirst. The realization that breathing isn't even necessary anymore is probably the most alarming aspect of your new life. Going to bed during the day and being awake all night might not seem so strange to many of us in this age of electricity, but after a while, it will take its toll. As a newly turned vampire becomes more accustomed to their fate, their living space is likely to change to reflect this. Since food and water are no longer necessities, dishes, drinking glasses, pots and pans, and random snacks are either gathering mold in the sink or trash hidden away. As they progress, they realize that there is really no need for a fridge anymore. If the vampire has been around long enough, they might get rid of it to make room for something else, space being a premium in a small city apartment. Blocking out the sun becomes an early and urgent affair. They would likely use whatever is available to keep the burning rays at bay. Pizza boxes, cardboard, and duct tape. One could assume that after some time they would upgrade that haphazard looking window into something more refined. Depending on the interest in and sense of style, some might appreciate the finer things in life, making on life that much more manageable. If not neatly arranged in bookshelves, you would likely find books and literature on vampirism and other occult topics strewn about as the Thin Blood tries to make sense of their new reality. Aside from the furniture and design of a vampire's haven, there are some other opportunities to tell their story. The newfound thirst for blood likely put a dent in the neighborhood population of stray cats and dogs. A small animal does not offer much sustenance, but it is likely you would find remains of pets and other critters littering the apartment. Barely lit rooftops of buildings are great areas for the vampire to dwell in, but trying to set dress in an area to show what a vampire leaves behind is difficult. Since they don't eat or drink, they don't leave behind food. Other than wet footsteps and other small clues, there's not much to go by. These are just some of the ways you'll be able to identify or possibly find out more story in this world and the environment you travel through as you play the game. And now we're going to talk about Christmas. The storyline of this game takes place during one of the most festive seasons of all in Seattle, Christmas. Christmas trees, tinsel, ornaments, stringed colored lights, Salvation Army donation boxes. It is imperative that they drive the mood of this game towards a holiday theme, and that it is clearly evident to the player. Not everything that happens during Christmas is all cheer and joyful. Now, there's going to be blind spots in the game, and I covered this in one of the previous videos I did for this. I believe it was actually the second or... No, it was definitely the first. It was one of them. A major aspect of this game is that breaking the Masquerade has severe consequences. Causing havoc and trouble in a well-lit open area will alert the police and be a detriment to your health as a vampire. Where can you be free and enjoy your new vampiric superpowers? Where's the dark web of this city and the environments where the lawless can run to? Blind spots are alleyways, dimly lit back parking lot areas, or even rooftops. You definitely notice that the blind spot areas will feel unkempt. Garbage might be piling up, rats are scattered about, and the walls are tagged with graffiti. Basically, you'll know when you're in a blind spot. I mean, other than when the HUD tells you that. Briefly, we're gonna go over weather. Basically, they decided to have the exterior environments in Bloodlines 2 always be wet, be faithful to the weather in Seattle during the winter months. That's it right now, guys. So we're just gonna move straight on to horror, and there is going to be no teenage vampire angst happening here, or a coming-of-age scenario. The vampires in this, as well as you, are monsters and shall remain monsters. Without giving too much away, they said that if there are scenes of death and dismay, there will be quite a bit of blood and horror. They want to set the narrative mood of this game to be dark and disturbing. Now, one of the underlying sayings here, and one of the last things I'm going to go over, is the new world versus the old world. In Bloodlines 2, a major storyline is that there is a power struggle between the old vampires and the newer generation of vampires. I've mentioned this before, but we're just going to go into a little bit more detail about what the devs thought. Now, they don't go into much detail about this, since it might reveal too much of the story, but the current reality in Seattle is that there is an economic and cultural shift happening with the massive rise of tech companies and an influx of new people moving to the city looking for job opportunities. Things are not always what they seem, and we have tried to push the narrative through various locations in the game. The hope is that the players can see some of those underlying themes through environment art when they get a chance to play the game. Vampires don't breathe air, but quite a few of them still smoke. That's because of this, you might notice quite a few cigarette trays in this game. The older, more refined vampires prefer to drink blood straight from a victim's warm neck. Anything else would be considered vulgar. So if you see a glass of blood, it is likely another way for that vampire to show off for the player. You'll always have to pay attention to what the vampires are doing. They may not need to do things. They may not need to dress a certain way. They may not need to say certain things, but they choose to present themselves a specific way. Not everything is going to be what it seems. Neither are the people you meet. Now, one thing I wanted to point out as of the ending of this video is that the game is now in alpha as of a couple months ago. At this specific point in development, they are beginning to lock down certain features and quests. This means after extensive internal and external review, the feature or quest is considered complete and all work on the content is finished. This doesn't mean the feature or quest is done, however, as it still needs to be fully tested and reviewed for problems and bugs. Much of the one-handed melee attack animations have been updated and locked, including animations for knives and lead pipes. The VFX team has finalized the telekinesis effects for the mentalism discipline, and the environment art team has wrapped set dressing of interior spaces in the domain of the Baron of Aurora. For the first part of the year, they are going to be pushing toward all content of the game being final, and bug fixing and polishing becoming the priority. AI engineers are populating the levels with different types of pedestrians and encounters. Environment artists are dressing side quest spaces. Lighting and animation have their eyes on the conversations with NPCs, making sure they are well lit and fit well with the surrounding environment. And the narrative and quest design teams are hard at work adding some additional content and surprises. What this basically means is that what we saw in the demos was not everything. There was reasons, other than the fact that it might have been the worst case scenario when you break too many masquerades as the excuse was given. It also means that they weren't done, that they weren't ready, which is another reason why it's great that they pushed it. On one hand, I'm happy that they pushed it because they get to fix all this, they get to add all this, they get to polish everything. On the other hand, obviously I'm still sad because I wanted to play it as soon as possible. I cannot wait to play it. I really cannot. That's why I'm playing Vampire the Masquerade Courtiers of New York, because I just need more. But on the other hand, this explains why the demo looked the way it did. It's good, and I would have played it as is, even with the bugs, even with the issues that I saw, even with my impressions not being the best. It still looked great. It's still something I would have played. I would have played it had they released it April, March. Today, I would have played it then. It does not matter because I played the first, and I know what happened with the first. I know how that one was. It was still an improvement. But the fact that they decided to delay and decided to do the best they can, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. I'm going to try not to sound like a diehard fanboy, and then give them that, well, actually it's not just a few extra months, it's a lot of months. Give them that time, and then say, now it needs to be great. When it comes out, it has to be. Because not only did they delay, but it's built off another game that, well, a lot of people might say is completely amazing and jaw-dropping, etc. It's a game that I thought was good, but it wasn't something absolutely amazing. There was a lot of problems with it, and there was a lot of problems with the demo that was released. But hopefully, just hopefully, all of this is going to be fixed by the time it's released. Everything will be polished, the combat will look better, the animations will look better, textures will be better, everything will hopefully be better. Now, enough with my rambling, let's get some of this bonus info in. It's just a couple things, but I do want to throw it out. Basically, not only can you attract mortals, but you can also taunt them, charm them with the interact button that you see in the demo. The one where it says press X and it shows like attract like the attention. It actually can do multiple different things. And then I finally came up and found all resonance types and their colors. Fear is purple, desire is pink, pain is green, delirium is blue, and rage is red. We finally completed it, everyone. It took a while. It took a lot of digging around to finally piece it together through a bunch of forums and a bunch of different articles, but we did it. I'm excited to actually finally finish that. And blood buff that you played in the first Bloodlines game is considered to always be on in the second one. Players are also going to be able to put points into things they can do with weapons that humans cannot. And then factions are going to consist of both good and evil vampires. There isn't going to be one faction that's purely evil, one faction that's purely good. Each person in each faction is going to have their own agenda and are going to believe in, well, certain things. They could believe in the same thing as their leader, but it doesn't necessarily mean they believe in exactly everything. But either way, you guys have heard me ramble enough. Hopefully through this you got a little bit more of an idea about the game, a little bit more of what the devs are thinking of, a little bit more of what they're actually doing, what you could expect from the game and from the devs themselves with making the game before, you know, any more information comes out, the next demo, or before the game releases. Now, I know this was slightly different than what I normally did with the first two parts, whereas in that one, I decided to completely reword everything and then make sure that you guys got as much information as possible. This one was more of a direct take from the devs and translation and summarizing and really shrinking it down, because to make videos on every single dev blog would have taken a lot more than just this one video. But also, as I said before, I don't think having to read all of them is necessary. I honestly think just going over this video is enough. Everything in all of the dev blogs is summarized right here between what you really need to know from those dev blogs. One thing I do want to ask you guys is, if you did enjoy this, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe. I very much appreciate it to show your support by telling me you like this. You like the information I'm sharing, you appreciate the work I'm doing here, and that in turn makes me feel good as well. I hope you at least learned at least 3 things from here. I'm really trying to make sure that every video I release, you learn at least 3 things. Whether it's something you necessarily want to learn or not, I don't know, but I want you to at least know that when you go into a video that I make for this game or Cyberpunk 2077, there's going to be 3 things you're going to know coming out of it that you didn't know beforehand, and I really hope I achieve that. If you want me to continue doing the dev blogs as they come out, so obviously not one per time because some of them are really hella short, whereas others are ridiculously long, but if this is something you want me to keep doing alongside just bringing out the facts as well, please tell me about that below. And if this is something you absolutely hate and you don't want me to do, please tell me below. And then also, one more thing, guys. If you want to join my Discord and talk to me off hours when I'm not streaming or releasing videos, and I will get back to you as soon as possible, you can through the Discord link below in the description. So if you want to go the extra mile to support me because you like what I do and you want me to keep doing it, and you want me to keep always being relevant with games and etc., and just, you know, all around just wanting to take that extra mile to support me, there's a Patreon link below too. You can donate or you can become a Patreon member. For people who do become a Patreon member, there are benefits to it. I'm still working on fleshing them out completely, but the one thing that I can say is that if you do join the Discord, you have a Patreon role. The second you join a Patreon, you will be in the description below. In my intermission screen, when I'm streaming live, your name will be in the Patreon member area. I'm trying to give back to you guys just as much as you guys give to me in terms of feelings. And I hope that's something that you guys can all appreciate, because I appreciate you all as well. Thank you guys for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in my next release or stream. Catch you all later.